Hey, welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike and Davina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today, my guest is Brendan Duffey, and if you're not familiar with Brendan, Brendan is an engineer who has done a lot of different things in the industry. Everything from working in commercial audio, film audio, mixing, mastering, live sound, and he's worked with a ton of big names, everyone from Run DMC, Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden, Sheryl Crow, Snoop Dogg. He's done a ton of other stuff. And in today's episode, we cover a lot of different topics. But Brendan is so good with articulating his process and his thoughts and just how he approaches things. I think you're going to find so much good stuff in the way he describes everything. But we cover everything from, building your career and how to establish yourself as someone who's worthy of getting good projects. Even if you're not a big name, how do you build that career? How do you get those clients to come through the door and build a steady clientele? So we talk about that. We talk about his process for mastering. We talk about using AI in mastering as well, which is kind of a unique thing that we don't talk about too much on this podcast. Brendan incorporates a lot of that into his process. So it's kind of refreshing to hear how he's using it and what his current outlook on it is and where he predicts the future of AI is going to be in the mastering realm. We also get into Atmos mastering and what that entails and how it differs from stereo processing, because Atmos mastering is kind of a new thing in the audio world. A lot of people believe that you don't need mastering in Atmos, but Brendan's got a unique take here as well. So I think that in this episode, you're going to find so much good stuff here. And like I said, Brendan is so good at describing how he thinks and how he feels and how he approaches things. So you're going to really enjoy this one. That said, let's just jump right into it. Brendan Duffey, thank you so much for being on the Master Your Mix podcast. What's going on, man?
Not much. Just got done with the day of mixing some stuff for a documentary.
Awesome. For people who might not be familiar with you, can you give us a little background on who you are, what you do, and ultimately how you got into all the stuff that you're working on today?
Wow.
Loaded question, I know.
My name is Brendan Duffey. Today I'm a mixing and mastering engineer. I'm out of Jupiter, Florida. This is my single room facility where I do most of my work. I do a lot of Atmos mastering and stereo mixing and mastering. I started this when I was 17, I bought a 4-track actually when I was 13, but really started into it doing live sound, toured with some bands, did a lot of live sound everywhere. Was an intern with Sylvia Massy, went to Sacramento City College, got a degree there, went to Chico State, got a degree in recording arts there too. Worked at recording studios, recording punk bands, recording my metal band. Cut to the chase, I moved to Brazil to follow my college girlfriend. Actually went to Banff Center for Fine Arts to be an audio guy there for a while, but that doesn't matter. There I started working at a big recording facility, got all the big rock bands. 2 years later, I opened up my own large-scale facility called NorCal Studios, and we were around for about a decade and did we were pretty prominent figure as far as studios go, in advertising, film, music production, pretty much everything we could get our hands on. After I had kids, I sold my facility, moved back to Davis, California, became a college professor at American River College for 6 or 7 years, opened up a single room facility and started mixing and mastering again. And 2 years ago, I quit my job at the college, started going to Berklee College of Music to get a master's degree in music business, which I'm going to be done with this year. And we moved to Jupiter, Florida, onto a sort of a ranch property out in the middle of nowhere. And I built a pole barn and put my studio in it and just hang out, at my pool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Man, a lot of ground to cover there.
Yeah, it's 30 years,
That's amazing. So what ultimately got you into this in the first place then?
I was that guy in the band that never played as well as everybody else, but was really into all the equipment. I was a decent guitar player. I played in a complicated death metal band, but I knew it was never, I always knew other guitar players were better than me. And I was really interested in the recording studio much more. And that was it. I always did live sound. I just liked turning knobs and recording stuff. So that's it. Yeah.
I love how you put that, as being the guitar player that, I can relate to that. As a drummer myself, I felt like, I didn't necessarily contribute to the songwriting side of things, but I needed to prove my worth in my band. So it was if I can just record the band or be that technical guy or something like that, then, I kind of earned my keep in the band and, earn my percentage, I guess,
I did a lot of songwriting, and I still do wrote a lot of lyrics. I mean, I participated as heavily because I was into music production too. But and I was playing really complicated death metal at the time, and the other guitar player and some of my friends were just so far beyond, and I started late too. It didn't make me not be interested. I still wanted to do it, but I was more compelled to record. I just liked it. And I excelled at it. I thought, at least at the time, it was something I felt more comfortable doing. And I was more interested in doing it. As much as I like getting on a stage and playing, I don't.
Fair enough.
And I hate touring,
Yeah. So then when you got started in the audio side of things, was there like a specific goal that like you sought out to be? Because it sounds like your career took a lot of different twists and turns where you did the live sound stuff, you did advertising and all that. So,
you know, all my goals, I think at the time were sort of like, you're smoking crack. But they were good to have. I mean, my two favorite producers are Bob Rock and Martin Birch. Martin Birch did all the Iron Maiden records. And it was, you know, Iron Maiden. I'm an Iron Maiden kid. I grew up on them and they're my favorite band. And last year I had Bruce Dickinson sitting in the studio with me.
That's amazing.
So like what I wanted to be a badass rock producer. That's what I wanted to be. That was my intuition, is to record a lot of bands. Was listening to a lot of people like, you know, at the time, Roy Z, who I worked with, was incredible producer, was putting out all the Halford records, Judas Priest, was really into that. And then when I opened my recording studio, I started recording a lot of different types of bands, Brazilian music, samba, forró, and that really changed my outlook on things and what I wanted to do. But it, you know, it never took me off the path of doing rock and heavy metal. So I did a lot of worked with André Kisser from Sepultura there in Brazil, a guy named Andre Matos, who used to sing for Angra, who's a phenomenal singer who unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. Angra, and a lot of people know Angra from Kiko, who played in Megadeth for 10 years or so. But where did I want to be? I guess here. You know, it's not as majestic as I thought it would be, but I rather enjoy it. You know, I walk in and I work on music all day and I get paid for it.
Yeah.
Quite handsomely. So I think, you know, I got a family and 2 kids and a wife I've been married to. This will be 20 years. I guess all of this was my objective. So I'm not saying I'm like, this is where I'm like, I got it, but I did, you know,
yeah.
I do walk out of my house and go, it doesn't get much better than this. Even if I'm working my butt off.
No, but I think that's a really good point. You know, it's like, sometimes you have to have these like different twists and turns, and you got to try different things to like ultimately end up where you want it to be all along, you know, or it just, you kind of, sometimes taking all those different paths ends up leading to something really cool and exciting as well. So there's something to be said for having diversity and trying lots of things. Yeah.
Also, my wife was managing the studio. And she thought that, you know, it's going to be really dangerous to be a one-trick pony with a huge facility.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we took everything under the sun, which is great because my day isn't just heavy metal bands. Yesterday, I did a wonderful acoustic record. The week before, I did a Christian acoustic rock record from Brazil of a guy named Fernandinho. I got to do some wonderful country music a couple weeks ago. I'm doing a lot of the old time Brazilian people like Caetano and Caetano Veloso, Daniela Mercury, Milton Nascimento, a lot of the old country art. It's awesome because every day is a different style of music a lot of the time. Or at least if I'm mastering. If I'm mixing, you know, I'll be in an album for 2-3 weeks and then I'll get something else. But you know, I'm not just pinned into heavy metal.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like you really enjoy getting to work on a lot of different content and different material and stuff like that. And I was very curious to know, like, you know, how important is it to you to have that diversity? You know, is it that you take on that diversity just because you prefer to have that diverse? You prefer to work on different styles of music, or do you think it was just like
no? It's music is like food. I mean, no one wants to eat a hamburger and fries every day. Some people do. I don't.
yeah,
And I really couldn't imagine working on one style of music for the rest of my life. I have infinite respect for my friends who do. I have friends that, only do metal, only do rock, only do hip hop, and they're incredible at it. And that's their niche. I've never been one very much for niches. When I was a kid, I moved around the world. I lived in United States, Canada, Belgium. I traveled everything. I think almost every country in Europe when I was a kid.
wow,
My dad always had people from around the world in the house because he was a university professor for PhD students. So, I was really exposed to a lot of music, a lot of different people. And the coolest thing is getting to know all the people behind, the music. And you make friends all around the world, people you would never think you'd have contact with, and you do. And so I think it makes life a little more interesting for me. But that's just my take. I like
yeah.
music. I don't like one style of music. I am a metalhead, but I really, really enjoy Brazilian country music or traditional, like northern Brazilian, sort of roots music like forró, baião, axé, that type of stuff I don't mind working on it.
Yeah. No, that's refreshing to hear, because I think a lot of people think that, they need to niche down either their skills and maybe focus on mixing or mastering or whatever, but then they even take it a step further of like, I'm only going to work on heavy metal, or I'm only going to work on, country music or whatever. But I think that, what you said is absolutely true. Having that diversity makes it a lot more interesting if you enjoy it.
Well, it was also, when you have to pay the bills, I opened the studio and thought I was going to do one thing, and then I discovered I had to do everything to keep the doors open and pay the, everybody's health insurance and 13th salary and all this other stuff that you discover. So you learn to not say no. You learn to find a way to do every project to its fullest and make your client happy. And in doing so, some of the time you do something phenomenal. We had a couple records that just did really well that you would never expected it. And suddenly I find myself doing a bunch of samba records. I didn't even know the names of the instruments, but that's what they liked because they got something different. I didn't have the same approach, even the same cultural perspective. So it was something new for them too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. In addition to working on lots of different genres, it also sounded like you've taken on a lot of different roles, everything from working in commercial music to film music, doing live sound, that kind of stuff. And I'm curious to know about like some of the crossover between those different areas. Obviously for live sound, like you worked with a lot of big artists. You worked with like Run DMC / Anthrax, like Maroon 5. Like you had a lot of different artists that you worked with there. So I'm curious to know, like, do you feel like there's a crossover between working in the live world versus working in the studio these days? And what similarities would you say there?
It all comes down to one thing, is your network. And I'm a people person. So if I meet someone, I'd meet someone in Brazil at front of house and go, hey man, we really got along. What's your number? Let's, go get some lunch or something. You end up going and getting lunch. And then I would travel to LA and go hang out with them. And they do music I'm not associated with really. And then, you keep in contact and your network grows and your work grows. I think that's what really comes. I've never gone after specifically working with a genre. I think I go after working with specific people. Like if I meet someone, I get along with them. I do say, hey, we would do well working together. And a lot of time it happens. Like I worked with Sheryl Crow over the pandemic. Right before the pandemic, I went to NAMM. Through a mutual friend, I met a gentleman named Alberto Vaz, who's an incredible Brazilian music producer and engineer, and he happens to be Sheryl Crow's engineer. We hung out for 2 hours, shot the shit, laughed at each other, and we just got along. And I ended up phoning him. And a couple weeks later, he goes, hey, I got the Sheryl Crow track. You interested in doing some work? Yeah. And that turned into like 50 songs.
Wow.
I wasn't going after Sheryl Crow. I was meeting someone, and we're friends, and we talk all the time now. We just got along. And I think those are the best relationships, personally and professionally, be in, because one, you have someone that's going to say your name even when you're not in the room, and they're going to say good things. It's the best branding you could possibly have, especially when it's someone as respected as Alberto. And two, you get insight into how he works and how he got to be this caliber of engineer. And three, you've just got someone who's actually happy for you when you meet success. Those are hard things to come by, that like trifecta of professional and personal relationship where no one's really jealous of the other. You know, you get something big and all those people call you and go, oh yeah. That's usually what I'm looking for, because that's a foundational network that doesn't go away unless you really try to get rid of it.
Yeah. No, I love that you bring that up, because I think that a lot of people struggle with the idea of networking and they don't even know how to begin with it, you know?
Well, that's how to begin. You can't have the rest. You're not going to go anywhere if you don't pay attention to the people that have that ability, the vehicle to get you there. And a lot of times just extending a hand. You know, I'm a competent engineer. They know, oh, this opportunity popped up. Someone's not coming. Hey, Brendan. And they know that they can put my name on the table and I'll deliver. That's not only professionally. That's personally. You know, I'm not going to send some stupid email. I'm not going to be rude. I'm not going to make outlandish remarks. You know, I'm a good hang. I know how to do things. That's what you have to prove. And every network is different. I've gotten jobs where I know it's not going to last, even though I did a great job and so did they. We didn't click. So, you know, it's not like you can ignore them, but it's definitely not something I'm going to put my 100% into pursuing. I will take my time and give them the client service that they need, treat them with the utmost respect and empathy for any situations that pop up where they, you know, need something last minute or made a mistake. But I'm not going to put all my eggs in that basket, because I know that it will not yield in the long term.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting to bring up. And you know, I think some people would be listening to this and thinking, like you mentioned, being a people person. And obviously, if you're putting yourself out there and you're meeting new people, you might only have like a limited amount of time to prove your value to somebody, you know? And so I think some people might hear this and be like, well, how do I prove I'm a people person? Like, how do I actually, like, you know, get someone to like give me the time of day to actually have those longer conversations? And
I think that's something you don't need to try to do, because in actuality, I'm a hermit. Like my wife's always like, get out of the house and go to Miami, you know, go here. Don't you have to go to LA and hang out with your friends? Oh, really? And I want to, but I don't. But when I get there, I'm just me. And that's the best thing to do, is you don't have to put on an actor's mask, and wear your intentions on your, you know, have them on your name tag. Hey, I'm here. I'm a cool person. I'm just waiting for a door to open. And as long as you leave that on the table and you don't talk about it anymore, it's fine. It's sort of said and done. You know, if you're in that room, there's a reason. And that's because someone said something about you while you weren't in it. And you can let that do its work. You don't have to.
Fair. Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up. Yeah, because that's one thing that people always ask me about is like, you know, how do you network and like, how do you get in with the right people? And I think you're right. It's just like, you just got to put yourself out there, and it's kind of like being an extroverted introvert, you know. Sometimes most of us like this job because we get to be introverted. We get to work in like a small room and work to ourselves sometimes. And I think we do have to remind ourselves we got to get out there and, you know, have fun with it.
Consistency isn't, it can't just be inherent in the quality of your work. If you're a gigantic jerk every once in a while, you're a gigantic jerk, because it only takes one mistake to sink the boat, you know, really.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we have a hole in the boat. It's sinking. It might go down slowly. So, and you find that out about people. You know, I've gone to projects with people that seem wonderful, And then halfway through the project, the person has, a mental meltdown and everybody goes, uh-oh, this is a sinking ship. And you watch everybody sort of scatter to the sides. And usually that's not a person who works on the same project with the same people. And you can notice that about professionals. And there's plenty of people who do that, have wonderful careers, but I'm only interested in working with you on one project.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Definitely a good point to bring up there. Cause yeah, I think you need to be thinking of those relationships and building them long-term so that you can, have repeated work with people and, all that kind of stuff. It all helps your career instead of like chasing one project to the next.
There's a funny thing that everybody says on the internet, which is work-life balance. And I can't think of another word than bullshit for that, because there is going to be, if you want to be successful in this, there is a period of your life where there is going to be no balance. It's going to be as unbalanced as humanly possible. And the best thing you can do for yourself is have a network of people that understand that. Because if you don't, your personal life's going to be in shambles. And I'm not innocent. Like I've plenty of time. My wife's like, hello, we live here. And it's sort of my call of like, hey, you got to slow things down. And there is not really a balance. You're either doing it or you're not. What you can do is decide at one point in your life as how hard you're going to work and how far you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that are, I look at Muso and they're in the top, in Muso AI, that format, they're in the top 20 engineers. And I go, that's awesome. I'm so proud of them. I don't have the energy or the willpower to put in the work to be there. As I walk outside, my kids are like, hey, Dad, you want to go swimming? No, I can't do your project today. It'll be tomorrow. And they're like, no, okay, we're going to do someone else. Okay. And I'll just hop in the pool. And I've lost my FOMO. Lost that a couple of years ago. So I'm just, if I can stay where I am, I think I'm pretty good to go. But their work-life balance I think is bullshit. You just decide how much you're going to do and how much damage can be done on one side or the other. There is no balance.
Absolutely true. I love that you bring that up. Like I interviewed Susan Rogers a while ago and she said the same sort of thing. She said like, work-life balance is kind of like you decide what the balance looks like. If it means that like your focus is that I need to work my ass off for now, then so be it. But but then you prioritize like what's the most important thing. And, if you have a family or whatever, and you want to obviously prioritize that, then you shift the balance, so it's whatever you want to make of it.
Well, the other thing about work-life balance is when you tend to be unbalanced to one side or the other, you're with people who are unbalanced too. So you can't work in a unbalanced like drive department. Like all your friends are working their asses off constantly, and you're in the slow lane on the highway doing 25 saying, hey guys, I need a little more family time. You're going to cause an accident. You're going to screw shit up. So you also have to find the people that you can work with that are in the same, I hate the word mindset, sound like a coach, that have the same outlook on life, the same determination and goals at that point. That's not a mindset. That's a reality. That's responsibility. Responsibility isn't a mindset. It's there. It's living. It's breathing. It needs to be fed, taken to school. It needs to be cared for. You need to sleep next to it at night. And I say it because it's just generic, but it's my wife and kids. And so I'm not going to be in the pool of engineers that work till 4 a.m. I will cause a car accident because I will leave. I can do that once a week. I will leave at 5 o'clock and be like, see you tomorrow. And I'll get a middle finger and I'm off the project. So I've made the determination that I say that up front, and I already lose the project to begin with because they know I'm not willing to sacrifice my life's objective.
Fair. But then you'll also start to find people who align with that objective as well. And
I have plenty of those,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good point. And, I think that a lot of people have that fear of like the FOMO thing that you talked about. It's like they feel like they need to take everything on, and then they start to suffer because of it. And, they don't have their priorities in check, and they feel like they're dropping the ball on certain things that actually do matter to them. So I think by putting yourself out there and being like, this is what I believe in, this is who I want to be, what kind of projects I want to take on. Like, I think that you're gonna find you might have a slower build to find the big network of people that are aligned with you, but in the end, you're ultimately gonna end up with the right people and end up having a career that matches what you want.
I think age is determining too. I wouldn't go do a NASCAR race with a 1977 car.
Fair.
Because my motor's old. I know that. I don't, I drive differently. I'll go the scenic route. Don't get in the way of the people in the fast cars. You can watch them, you can learn from them, but I just don't step into that lane anymore because I know it's not going to, I watched the Jason Joshuas and the Mix by Ali. Like, Mix by Ali is just a phenomenal, like, that guy just does everything. He has more energy than I have in one day than I have in a month. And I just have to look and be awe-inspired, and know that I'm not going to be that person.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. No, I'm glad that we covered this in the conversation, because it's definitely something that I hear a lot of people ask me about, and it's something that people do struggle with. They, especially people that are maybe older getting into audio engineering. They kind of have like the golden handcuffs of another job or their family and all that kind of stuff, and so they're trying to figure out, like, how do I maybe make this transition into this career, and they have to make their minds up about this kind of stuff. So I think it's good for people to hear what's possible, and it seems possible the way you put it,
Yeah.
Yeah. Earlier you'd mentioned getting the chance to work with Sylvia Massy, and she's awesome. I love Sylvia. She was one of our guests on the podcast a long time ago. I'm curious to know, like, what was your experience working with her like?
Man, all my idols were heavy metal producers. And I was living in Chico, and I moved up to Weed, California. After doing an interview with her, she was in the Vaudeville Theater up there. I was her first intern from college.
Oh, wow.
And Sylvia was everything I wasn't expecting. I didn't know who she was because I didn't listen to her records. When I found out, I was like, oh, wow, really cool. And Sylvia took all the, like, heavy metal microscopes off me and, like, shoved that, like, she just has this who cares mentality, like, have fun, explore, put weird microphones. It's more about performance than capture. There was just a lot of things I wasn't expecting, but something about Sylvia I thought was really fascinating is she said the story enough online. Like, at a certain point, like, her life was like a dumpster fire, and she would come in the studio and she would just turn on her like studio persona, and no one would know. It was like nothing. And I always think of that Pirates of the Caribbean thing when at the end, when the guy's boat's blowing up and he's just walking down and happy. That's Sylvia. Like, that was my respect for her became so immense at that point, because I knew something was going wrong outside, but inside the studio, she did her job, and not just did her job. She did a phenomenal job. Like, I would just sit outside the door and watch her do vocal production. It was just one of the coolest learning experiences of my life. And I'm friends with Sylvia until today. We still talk probably like once a year, but she's awesome. And when I moved back to California, I mixed a few projects with her at one of her studios when she still had the need.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, she's definitely known for being such a creative engineer, and it sounds like she kind of showed you a lot of things that were maybe not the way you used to do it. So I'm curious to know, like,
I wouldn't even put as Sylvia as a creative engineer. Sylvia is just a creative person.
Fair.
She has a perspective that I think is really unique, and that's what makes her so dramatically different than most people. She's just Sylvia. Like, I don't really know anybody. And I think it's I don't really care about microphones, and I say I don't care about equipment as I have the equipment I love. I don't drool over equipment or see anything anymore. you could give Sylvia a Mackie board and a bunch of SM57s, and you'd probably make a better record than you will. You know, it's like, it is definitely outlook and perspective and what you bring to the table personally and your approach, and how you communicate rather than anything else. The determining factors of equipment is so minute in this case that really, she is the deciding factor with the band.
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah, I was curious to know, like, how that experience and like the teachings that you learned from her, like how that rubbed off onto you and the work that you do today. But it sounds like the gear thing's just clearly not an issue for you.
Well, I could never afford any of that. Like, her studio looked like my plugin folder. So, you give up on that and you find out. And she did say, you're the most valuable thing you have in your studio. So I think those lessons are in the back of my mind very, very far away now because I have my own way of doing things. But at that point, when I didn't know anything and all I had was bravado, it was a real kick in the butt to see someone do a record so far out in left field in comparison to what I thought making a record was.
Mm-hmm.
And it came out brilliantly. So it really made me second guess what I was doing and second guess who I was listening to.
Gotcha.
I'll put it this way. She's the type of person you encounter that makes you think and then makes you think twice. And those are good people to have around because you can get in a cycle of repeating. And when you're with someone who doesn't like repetition, it's sort of, why does that person have the sort of the gall to do that and I don't? And she does it staring in the face of everybody like, fuck you, I'm going to record through a pickle. And people are like, that's stupid. And she does it with a potato, and does it sound good? That doesn't matter. That's whatever. Everybody's like, what does it sound like? It's beside the point. It's the majesty around the rest of the operation. That's the important part.
Interesting. No, I love that. And I think you're right. Like, I think it's so easy for us to, you learn like, oh, I'm going to put a 57 in front of a guitar cab. And that just becomes the way you do things forever. And it can make the process boring after a while. So, I love that. That's the thing I admire about Sylvia is that, like you said, like there's no rhyme or reason. It's just like, she just does things because it's exciting for her. And she just tries things. So, yeah, very, very cool. So I was curious to know, like, do you feel like that's rubbed off to you now? Like, do you like get out of your old ways and try to break up your patterns as well?
No. So in certain worlds,
fair enough, yeah.
Like in mastering, no, I'll do new things, but I think I'm a creature of habit, and I'm not Sylvia. And I'm not expected to. I think the stuff that my clients keep on returning to me for is because of me and not because of me utilizing someone else's perspective or thought process to make a record.
Fair.
So no, I'm more of a creature of habit when it comes to mastering. When it comes to mixing, it depends on the record. Certain types of bands, like heavy metal bands, they're fairly specific. Can't really like put a pickle in there,
Yeah.
And it's also a financial question because a lot of time, financially, I just need to get it done. I'm going to make the band happy and I'm going to make, my bills go away. There is that reality of like, what's my schedule? Can I make this payment? So there is other stuff around the world that affects how we work, but I'm comfortable and I like my work. So why change it?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And especially for something like mastering, it's like sometimes the role of the mastering engineer is to be kind of transparent. And so it's not like, a mastering engineer that's going to run it through a pickle, it's going to.
Well, that's the role of certain mastering engineers. There's others that's not why you go there. I mean, there's certain mix engineers like that you go to them because it's gonna come back, and with a much different perspective than possibly you had. They have a very significant footprint, like a Sean Everett.
Fair.
It's not going to come back the same way as opposed to, you get a Chuck Enley or someone like that. I think they're less distinct as an engineer and more concentrated on the artist. He's always a mix engineer that does brilliant stuff that's in accordance with what the song needs, as opposed to a secondary creative process in the mix. It's the difference between, I would say, Bob Ludwig and Mandy Parnell. Like Mandy was like big, heavy, like a lot of sound, and Bob was like touch it up. So
yeah, that makes sense. So then when it comes to mastering for you, like what's your normal mindset going into a project? How do you start? Where do you start? What are you listening for?
I'm listening to my client first and foremost. What type of master, what type of volume, what's their expectation? I think that's the best one is you ask, hey, what is your expectation for this master? Expectations up front is so important. Oh, just give it to me and I'll guess. No, that's not how this works. It's not your project. It's theirs. And mastering is the last artistic step in a production, but it also has a lot of technicalities to it that need to be addressed before you begin that artistic process. So those technicalities can be laid in and not affect the artistry, you could say. And a lot of time they will. You'll have to lean off certain aspects. I had a record last week that I really wanted to use the analog equipment. And the guy was like, no, I don't want you to touch it. I just want you to touch up. It's already at -7. I want you to get rid of resonance. I want you to do this. And I don't want it any color. Okay. It came out of the box. I actually used one piece of equipment, but nothing that has a color. And I felt I could get a little more volume for them, and they liked it. But they had me do an in the box master to see and compare. So you're also limited by the expectations of the client, not to your work, but the expectation of how their music is going to sound, which is top of mind always.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. So then as far as your actual process, is there like a certain workflow that you always stick to in terms of like order of processing or that kind of thing?
Oh yeah. Because I do that because I don't make mistakes then. I have specific, intake and outtake, as I call it, pitch and catch procedures, how I measure how hot it goes into analog. Do I use, which D to A do I use? Which A to D am I going to use? Testing equipment to see if it's okay. How I send the files to there's a whole process I go through with a checklist to ensure that I don't screw it up, because that's where you really can't be absent-minded, because you're really dealing with so little. You don't want to make a little mistake that ends up being a big annoyance to your client. And that type of consistency is really, really important. You don't want your client going, hey, did you hear like a tick at like 30 seconds in the song? If that happens, I get really frustrated with myself because I didn't do a QC at that point, and even go and look in like RX and go, hey, can you find any inconsistencies? And AI is really helping with that lately. Like, can you find anything that doesn't belong? And it'll go, hey, look over here. Oh, it's and some of the time it's something you don't even hear. So I won't fix it. It's an anomaly of the music, but some of the time it's something that, passes you by. It's why this item lives on a shelf back there when I'm doing deliverables, because I can get my headphones and I don't have the distraction of the digital god sit there and doom scroll
yeah
and not pay attention to what I'm supposed to be doing.
No, I love that. I think it's so critical to have that checklist, and I'm glad that you mentioned having that, and the importance of it. I think that that's huge. You mentioned AI, and you're the first mastering engineer, first engineer I think on the podcast to mention using AI as part of their workflow. So I'm curious to know, like, what are you using for that? Like you talked about how it's detecting like clicks and stuff like that. Like, what kind of tools are you using there?
Well, click detection, you can see like DC offset problems, stuff that you can't hear that might affect. Some of the time it doesn't, so you don't always fix it. But man, if you've got another tool in the toolbox, I'm not using it in the creative realm, just the technical realm. AI can help you name your tracks. AI can tell you if there's anomalies between them. They can tell you if there's anomalies in them. There's so much stuff. I've been using spectral layers from Steinberg. I've been using, of course, RX from Isotope, which is just mind-blowing. Both of them were just phenomenal programs. Why wouldn't you use that? It's just, but I avoid using like Gold Floss and those EQs because I tried it once. I did a master with one of them. And it never came out the same every time because every pass is different. And I told, I went, unless you can record your passes, I'm not interested in this. But it can tell you a lot about the track before you even start on it. You can just go through and examine it. You can pull apart tracks and find some pretty strange stuff especially with spectral layers. There was a problem with the track a couple days ago, and I put it in the spectral layers, and the producer kept on saying there wasn't, you couldn't hear it. And you never want to tell your client, their monitoring sucks. But it did. And I went in and I found the occurrence. And I took that layer and I sent it to him. And he just went, holy shit. And it was really cool because I have tips. You can tip me on my QuickBooks. And he tipped me a significant amount of money because I never told anybody, even his client, of what occurred. And it was a mistake he had made. In his setup, and he couldn't hear it.
Very interesting. So at what point in your chain then, or in your process, do you introduce these tools like spectral layers and that kind of thing?
That is on intake, where like I'm getting the tracks and I want to look at them, because some of the time, I mean, if you get too many clicks and pops in a track, you just send it back. If you have a good rapport with the person who sent it, say, hey, it would be better if you did this, just do the Shift Option F, and we will have less problems. And also outputting to make sure I didn't make a mistake. The biggest mistakes are made at the beginning and the end of the song, especially the end. The biggest mistakes I hear on records are the person who didn't listen to the fade. They turn around and talk to the client, and there's always those things. So I use it to detect their screw-ups and mine.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you're right. It's so easy to like just get distracted. Yeah, talking to a client in the fade, or like you said earlier, like looking at your phone, and like those things can get in the way and easily make you miss some detail that could be catastrophic.
AI is something I feel like I'm even doing my cumulative experience or whatever they want to call it at Berkeley. My final assignment is on the integration of AI and CRM software with a small footprint audio mixing mastering facility, and how I can link all of this together to make emails, to detect anomalies, to everything. And it's to prove how much we still need to be a part of the creative process and the technical process, but how we can improve ourselves in consistency, in creativity, financially, in partnership with a very powerful tool. And while many people are seeing, the doomsday of AI with, record labels, copying voices, and just everything that you constantly see, I still see that cars don't drive by themselves. If I took my 12-year-old kid and showed him the gas pedal and the brake, I guarantee in 10 minutes he'd drive almost as well as a Tesla by itself. So there, isn't quite there yet. And even if it was, the people who work with me aren't interested in working with robots.
Fair. Yeah. No, I think
That might
that's
change. That might change. I didn't
yeah.
say it wouldn't, but for the next decade, I think a lot of stuff, great stuff's going to happen. But in order to really understand what's happening, we have to understand how it works. Therefore, you have to integrate it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's an interesting topic in itself because yeah, a lot of people, like you said, they see that doomsday and they think, oh, there's not going to be a job for me as a mastering engineer or mix engineer. But there are ways that we can use it to our advantage right now to maximize our workflows, our efficiencies, our profits, all that kind of stuff. And
that's what they said when they went from mono to stereo. That's what they said when they went from 2-inch and ADATs to Pro Tools. And that's what they said. It's constantly, we're going to lose our jobs. And some people do. And some people create new ones, you know? So,
yeah,
no one knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like that quote from, I think it was Henry Ford, who said, like, you know, if he had asked people what they wanted back in the day, they would have said faster horses. And, you know, he just saw something different, made cars, and then that started a new industry. That started a new thing. So, you know, I think AI, personally, I think that there's a lot of great benefits that can come from it. I think people need to stay on top of it and not just feel like fearful of it and reject it, because I think if you reject it, then you're going to be behind when it actually takes over, you know? So,
you know, even saying you're going to be behind, yes, you could be, but in what market? Because I know people who still mix on SSLs.
Fair.
And up until recently, Chris Lordaggi was still using a 48-track 1644 machine to mix all his records, and he wasn't mixing little records on it.
Fair.
And so the value of his brand is more powerful than the power in our niche industry is more powerful to who matters, like the Green Days and the Nickelbacks. They're not interested in having a little machine do their mix. They're interested in having that knowledge base, that artistry, that equipment, that room, that consistency, and also that brand associated with their music.
Yeah.
No one's proud that they mastered on Lander, you know? No one's winning the Grammys going, yo, forget all you mastering engineers, Lander. Like, no one has a personal relationship. And I think that's what drives creativity. So people are always a little more proud when they've done it with their network.
Of course. Well, it's like in that case, you're hiring someone for their algorithm, you know, like their brain, their way of processing it. So, you know, building that reputation for the way you do things and your process and all that's going to supersede some
but it's like the
generic algorithm.
You go on the forums and you see all these people getting angry at Slate, at Waves, at Lander, and they don't realize they're providing a service they're making money from people that would never be my client.
Absolutely.
I didn't see a drop in service because most of these people don't care. They already made it usually at their house or something like that. And it's just one more thing the computer's going to do. Great.
Yeah.
Maybe when they have the opportunity one day, they're going to go do it where the person has all the flashy lights. But I don't waste my time being frustrated with the rise of new technology and services that utilize it. That
makes sense.
That is time wasted.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, speaking of new technologies, one other area that I know you focus on a lot these days is on Atmos mastering. And in many ways, that is a new thing. There's a lot of people that still they don't even know about Atmos to begin with. But Atmos mastering specifically, like, you know, I seem to remember when Atmos first started taking off in the audio world, there was a lot of people saying, like, you don't need Atmos mastering. And now Atmos mastering is
no, you don't. You don't need Atmos mastering. You also don't need stereo mastering. You can release your material the way it is, and you can go on your happy way. But, I mean, I just did a record, and my Atmos master, I didn't need to do anything. The guy sent it to me, and he goes, I want you to make this perfect, which amounted to me putting it the correct time code stamp. Making a micro adjustment so it met the -18 LKFS, -2 true peak standard. And I did one or two other things, pulled out a little click. It was done, and they paid me my full price because that's all they needed. That's mastering. Why are they doing this? Because they're sparing no expense on the project. And you know what? That's the difference between buying a Toyota Corolla and buying a Ferrari. They're going to think of the button that rolls up and down the windows, where the Corolla is going to go, oh, what have we used for the last 20 years? Just slap that thing on. They're going to think of every last detail because that matters. And that's the difference between a lot of records. A lot of people are putting out Toyota Corollas, which are damn good cars, you know? And if it was a damn good record, it could blow up. But not all big records are great records. And that's the difference is you can make a great record doing it that way. But you can make a great record even more phenomenal if you invest everything into every last inch and millimeter of detail. So you need to master an Atmos. You don't need to. But if you want to, I'm over here. Does it make a difference? Fuck yeah. It makes a huge difference when you're looking for small changes that make you happy. And especially when your entire career sits on your music, you're not going to lander. Lander will undoubtedly will not be able to deliver exactly what you need. I mean, these big artists are going to the same mastering engineers for their consistency. So what is mastering in Atmos? Consistency. And then I do other masters where I'm a little more heavy-handed. I'm helping them make the Atmos mix sound like the stereo mix. So I'm taking a lot of time, multiple stems, and doing a variation of processes to not only get the correct numbers, so it gets a good volume, but also sounds like the stereo mix. And then there's other people who send it to me who go, I don't want my Atmos to sound like my stereo mix. And I get their stems and I do something really super and creative. And I get it in the ballpark with the stereo mix. And then, I mix in Atmos. So there's a whole plethora of things you can do, but they all amount to one thing is giving your music the sonic footprint that you want. And that's it. Like there's always more work you can do. I mastered an album that was already mastered last week. The guy mastered it with a badass, and he goes, I want you to go through and check this. And I said, dude, I'm going to charge you full price. He goes, I don't care. So I phoned up the other mastering engineer and said, hey, dude, I'm QCing your work. And he goes, hey, can you look at a couple things for me? Because I phoned up and I know the guy and I went through it. And so it's going to say mastered by me and this other dude. It's fine. Like the client wanted to do that. Were they happy? They were super happy. I saw them in an interview last week where they're like, dude, this is the most perfect record I've ever made, sonically, artistically. And that's their investment for peace of mind.
I love that. No, you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of people really gloss over the fact that that QC part is such an integral part of mastering. And that's what people are paying for. And, it's not just making the song sound louder or different,
But on the internet, we hear so many opinions, and that's exactly what they are. Who cares? Whatever you want to do in your project to make it better, you go ahead and do that. And when you're ready to do that, I'm damn sure my company has one of those services, and we can deliver in the best possible way to you. If you have time to go on Facebook or anywhere else and complain about that, while you're doing that, I'm going to be doing the service that no one needs.
Fair. Love that. That's great. So I am just curious to dig into the Atmos mastering side a little bit more. As far as what are the differences between Atmos mastering versus traditional stereo mastering? Obviously, there's more channels, but what kind of things should people?
That's the only difference, really. That there's more channels, there's more to deal with. So the level of difficulty is infinitely greater. And there's a lot more space to work with. There's a lot more parameters. And it is a very much so. It's the first audio format that has come out in years in which we really have to abide by a set standard for volume. You know, everybody else does this for broadcast and movies. There's a set standard to everything. And we have a set standard. You can bypass it and you're going to pay a price, which you can do, because they're not going to deny you because you didn't meet standard. But I know for a fact that Apple has their own proprietary software that goes through and tells them about the quality of your master or your mix in Atmos. So you have to know the levels. You have to know the difference between what the sound's going to be in headphones, of course, the binaural, and utilizing the binaural settings, which are really important because as technology grows, so will the quality in binaural. Knowing how things are going to translate from speakers to headphones. So it's really important. You can mix just in headphones, but comparing, being in the space and being able to go like this, and I pull my headphones on and listen, having that translatability. And a lot of the time is getting someone who's a phenomenal mixer, who's just into Atmos, is just taking what they did and fixing some of the small items that generally cause inconsistencies in the audio that you're aware of. It's the same thing as mastering. It's just more channels and more rules.
Makes sense.
When record labels want specific, like, you know, a low row has to be on render or default. You have to have a certain amount. You can't have your binaural settings on default. There's a whole bunch of standards in which your Atmos mix will be denied at the label. Because they see that you didn't meet those consistencies. So the reason I sort of sit here and go, there's so much to do, which isn't a checklist, but I also just make sure the music translates well on it. Like, what does it need? Some hip hop just needs some stuff up front and some reverbs. People go, well, that's a stupid experience. I go, well, that's your opinion. And I move on. How can we make that nice? And I know it's not a stupid experience because I remember having, I did this rap album and I did really, really little. And the artist came out and listened to my studio and he turned around and went, thank you for not fucking with it. Like, it just sounds like it's around me. It sounds like the stereo mix, but it's bigger. But I didn't lose my initial idea. You didn't make stuff spin, and thank you. And that's what he needed. He wanted Atmos and that's what he needed. So, basically it's just like mastering, make it sound good or better, which is making the client happy and ensuring that all the parameters that are standards for delivery you have met.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like they took, you know, the loudness wars has been the big hot topic in stereo mastering forever. So it almost sounds like they learned from that experience and were like, let's standardize this now while we've got this new technology. Would you agree with that?
I don't think it was a learning thing. I think when you take, 9 or 16 or however many channels and you have to stuff it into 2, you're going to have some buildup. You're going to have to give yourself some headroom, sort of to create the space to have that capacity. Because before, if you didn't have a 5.1 system, you couldn't listen to surround sound. But now you have the capacity to filter that down to 2 channels for a binaural experience, which I think is phenomenal. Because we have to remember, we hear in Atmos. The world is all around us. Stereo is foreign. It's our standard for music, but we live in an immersive environment. It's not why Atmos or any immersive format is going to be the end all and stick around in the market. That's a different story. That's branding and marketing, which is up to corporations whose products we buy. That's a whole different ballgame. But the immersive experience is the natural one. And I find that mixing records is just having the drums in the room and putting people around. It does sound more like a band in the sense of the actual speaker system. When you put it in headphones, it loses some of that, but I think technology is going to make that a lot better. If you listen to the first MP3s, they were horrible. They've gotten infinitely better. So when you're in Tidal, it's almost lossless. Apple is a little lossless, and Spotify is just a dumpster fire. But we've gotten that far, you know.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Like, the way we listen to music is in spatial anyway. So it kind of does make sense that, you know, we're going to lean into that a little bit more. And, you know, I've been definitely on the fence myself with Atmos, and I've talked about this many times on the podcast. It's, you know, I think that it's going to take time for people for the consumers to accept it and take it on, and for the technology to make it consumable, you know, or affordable to get into. But I think there's definitely a market for it. And I think it can be cool to see like where it goes.
There is a giant market for it.
Yeah.
And it's in the movies we watch. It's everywhere else. I mean, a lot of people do have surround system. It's going into the dipole speakers that you buy for your Sonos systems. It's being branded and marketed and everything you can think of. I don't think Apple's giving up that easily.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And I think they're creating demand. Will it be gigantic? No. But I mean, I've got an Xbox. I'm buying games with Atmos on it.
It's true. There are definitely a lot of other forms of entertainment that we consume that uses that technology already. So why is music going to stay
in our thoughts a lot of the time?
Yeah.
That we only think of our own market, but we have to see Atmos isn't around for us. We were granted the software and the capability to place our music into it. But the overall, the umbrella thought of it is for sound. And there's a lot of creativity, other creative formats that utilize sound too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. I look forward to seeing what comes in the future and you know, where this technology goes, and, you know, where maybe new technology goes. Maybe at some point we're going to all have like chips implanted in our bodies, and our headphones are going to just give us Atmos in our brains, you know? Like,
you know, maybe.
That's a total sci-fi way of looking at it. But yeah.
I mean, my viewpoint is like I don't waste my time complaining about it or judging it. I'm here to provide services. I learned it as best and as quickly as possible. I invested in it. And if it fails, I did my part in that failure, and I had fun doing it. I love it. I love every minute of doing Atmos mixes. I don't regret it one little bit. A lot of people told me I was crazy, and it made me want it even more.
Yeah. I love that. I love your positivity and like your optimism with all this stuff. It's really refreshing to hear. And this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to hop on here and share so much with us and talk about your philosophies and your processes and stuff like that. I think there's a lot that people are going to take from this episode. So Brendan, thank you again for taking the time to be on here. If people want to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You know, I got my Instagram, Brendan Duffey Audio. I got my site, BrendanDuffeyAudio.com. That's about it. I mean, pretty low key person, I think. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's about it.
We'll definitely have those in the show notes as well, so people can easily click on them and go to the sites. Thank you again, man. I really appreciate this.
No problem at all.
So that was my episode with Brendan Duffey, and I really enjoyed chatting with him. I loved how he talked about, you know, working your way into this industry and how to actually network and truly be a people person so that people pay attention to you and so that they want to give you a shot. And, you know, listening to his story, you can tell that there was a lot of great opportunities that came his way as a result of just taking a shot, putting himself out there, being cool to people, you know, having friendly conversations. And that all generated a bunch of great projects that have sustained his career and become massive projects in his discography. So I love that he talked about that, because I know a lot of people listening to this are struggling with how to get their foot in the door, how to find the right clients, how to get people to want to give you a shot. So I think the advice that he shared here is really important and really valuable. So definitely take that into consideration and try to apply it to your own networking as well. I also really enjoy talking about Atmos mastering and learning a little bit more about what goes into that, because it's somewhat of a newer technology or a new way of engineering. And it's great to hear someone who is kind of in the early stages of it and how he's managing it and what's involved in the process and how it differs from stereo mastering. I also thought it was really fun to hear him talk about how you don't actually need mastering. And, I think his point there was really, you don't need mastering if you have something that already sounds amazing. But mastering is one of those things that people are really hiring people because of the quality control and that element of having a professional look at your files and be able to fix it if it needs it or leave it alone if it needs it. And that is really, you're paying someone to give you their professional opinion of something and to take it to that next level if need be, or just really respect what you've done. And I think that is a sign of a great mastering engineer. They know their place. They know when to leave things alone and when things are needed. But it also comes down to what he talked about earlier as well, with having open lines of communication with your clients and knowing what their expectations are of the project, because that can guide what decisions you make along the way and how much you do to a project. So yeah, I thought it was really great to learn about that side of things. And it was also really cool to hear him talk about working with Sylvia Massy and some of the various artists that he's worked with and how all those projects went down and, some of the lessons learned along the way as well. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this episode. I hope that you did too. And if you did, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast. That way you're notified about all new episodes as they go live each and every Wednesday morning, if you're not already subscribed, which you should be. And also, if you're someone who is working on new music and you're not quite getting the results that you're looking for, maybe you need someone to come in and be that quality control check to listen to your music and to be able to say, hey, this is what you need to do as far as EQ or compression or volume or whatever your songs need. If you're looking for someone to be able to give you that advice and direction as far as what you can do with your tracks and how to ultimately get there, and give you a process to follow so that with all the songs that you work on after that, you know exactly what to do. That is exactly what I offer inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. Inside that program, I work one-on-one with my students, walking them through the entire process of recording, editing, and mixing their music, and giving you direct one-on-one personalized feedback on your tracks, guiding you to what information is most relevant to help you grow your skills the fastest, get the quality levels that you're looking for the fastest, and ultimately have success in this industry if you want to be an engineer or if you want to be an artist who just makes awesome sounding music. That is what this program will teach you. So if you're interested in learning more about this, make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com/amplitude. And on that page, there's a link to fill out a form that lets me know more about the kind of projects you're working on and what you're looking for help with. And if it seems like I can help you, then I would love to hop on a call with you to learn more about your process and to learn more about how we can get you to that next level and how we can work together to make that happen. So if you're interested, one more time, make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com/amplitude, and that's where you can find all the details on that page. And with that said, we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@MasterYourMix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit MasterYourMix.com.